Welcome to Blessing Express. And
Okay.
today I am interviewing David Fiensy. And welcome, David, to Blessing Express videocast. And we're going to be hearing more about your book. But first, tell us about you and your biography and what your history.
Gloria, thank you for having me. Well, I am a semi-retired college professor. I taught biblical studies for over 30 years. I taught 250 some classes in that time, probably between 5,000 and 6,000 students. The subject, been to archaeology digs, but probably my proudest achievement is my marriage to my wife, our two daughters, and our grandchildren.
Well, that is great. Archaeology digs. That is amazing. I've always wanted to go on one, but now that I'm in my more mature years, I like watching about it instead. But today we're going to talk to you about...
Sure. I was going to say all ages. The last one I was on, a lady in her mid-80s showed up and made a contribution. She was just interested. And been back ever since. So you can easily get hooked doing that. So if you ever go, you may be going back.
I might not come back. I might just stay there forever.
You might.
Okay. David's book title is As Far as You Can. How did you decide to write your book, As Far as You Can?
Well, it's an interesting thing. As a religious person, I might say it was providential. So I have written these 12 nonfiction books, history books, which relate to the area that I teach. And when one of them came out in 2014, this guy called me from Florida, Key West, Florida. He said he was a movie producer, and I checked him out. He's made nothing, no Oscar winners, but he had made a few movies. He said, I like that nonfiction book. Could you write us up a movie script, a film script that would incorporate that? I said, well, I'm not really a scriptwriter. I could write you a narrative maybe. So I wrote what he called a treatment. You write the storyline, about 20 pages. I just sat down and the story came to me. But the story was based on an archaeological man whose skeletal remains they had extracted from a tomb. And he had a seriously deformed face. And so I asked myself, what would it be like to grow up as that young man in that culture? So the whole story is around that archaeology find, but I incorporated a lot of the historical stuff in it. You could write the story in any age, in any culture, but I put it in that culture. But that's how I got started. And then I just made the treatment into a novel.
That is fascinating.
I never heard from this movie producer since then.
Well, maybe you will soon. That would be great. Yeah. And how has your academic work prepared you to write this story?
Well, as I say, I've written 12 nonfiction books all about this same era, because this is the time span that's the background to the New Testament Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. So it's in Galilee. It's about that same period of time. So I'm pretty familiar with the culture, with the history, both from reading the texts, handling the artifacts, digging up the artifacts. So I was pretty comfortable with it. And so that's how it's prepared me to write it. I think all that years of teaching and writing and excavating.
So how did you come up with the title, As Far as You Can?
Yeah. So again, reading the literature, Jesus told a lot of parables, as we're well aware, if you've read the Gospels, but he wasn't the only one. It was a common thing to do for Jewish teachers. So the rabbis told many parables. And in the story, about 1/3 of the way in, one of the village elders is asked to entertain the group with some stories, some parables. And this is one of the parables. It comes right out of the rabbinic literature. But this is one of the parables. It's about a young man who wanders far from home, and he does things he's ashamed of. His father hears about him and sends him a letter and says, "Son, please come home." And his son's too ashamed. He says, "No, Father, I can't come home. I'm too ashamed. I don't want you to see me." So his father writes back, and he says, "Well, come as far as you can. I'll come the rest of the way and get you." So as far as you can becomes, in the rabbinic parable, a symbol for, if you don't think you can come to God completely, come as far as you can. He will meet you there and take you the rest, just like the father in the story. So it's like the pivotal interpretive point of the novel. But that it had to be the title.
Makes for a really good title. I'm getting more and more interested in your book. Okay, a lot of people know, especially if they've been brought up with Jewish culture, that the boys have been favored over the girls. And why is that so?
Yeah, it's not particularly an element of Judaism necessarily. It's a Middle Eastern value, and still there. In the Middle East today, if a man sires a son, he will change his name. So let's say he named his son Omar, he'll call himself Abu Omar, father of Omar. It's such a tremendous honor to have a son. He doesn't do that for a daughter. It's just a Middle Eastern value. But it was there then too. And so part of as a father of two daughters, part of my motivation subplot is daughters are just as important as sons. Don't buy into that value system. So it's kind of that subplot going through the story. It's very much many people who want to adopt a child will adopt a child from overseas. It will usually be a girl, because those are the children that the families will discard first. It's a sad thing. It's just really sad. But so it's sort of combating that mentality that I run that theme through the novel.
That's really good that you do, because being raised with an Orthodox Jewish mother, I was not considered important. Only my brother was. And that was,
really?
Yes, until the day she died, I was not important. And it was just really, really sad. And then here I see a cousin of mine who's female being adored by her parents. And then my other great uncle had 2 girls. And it's like, I got the wrong parents.
Yeah.
But it's good to know that.
I'm sorry. You're just as important as anybody else.
That took me thank you. It took me a long time to realize that. And, and I would compete, that's where competition can come in, with the girls trying to compete with the boys for saying, hey, I am a person, I am important. And
absolutely you are.
Yeah, so girls, don't give up. Ladies, you are just as important. Don't compete with anybody. Just stand in your own self-confidence, and people will love you for who you are. There's
if they don't, it's their problem.
That's right. Exactly. So what did you center your story on? What's the theme that you have centered around your story?
Yeah, it's the protagonist, the man. His name is Elazar. I chose that name very carefully because it means in Hebrew, God has helped. But he doesn't realize God is helping him. He's like many people who suffer tremendous losses, and he has, for his culture, he has horrific losses toward the beginning of the story. And when people suffer loss, they often feel alone. And, and so the point of the story is something helpful come out of your tragedy. It doesn't make the tragedy less bad. That won't happen. But if something helpful comes out of it, it makes the tragedy more bearable. And that's what happens in the story. So the point of the story is to give people hope. And so I visualize these readers picking up the story who maybe are just like Eleazar, who just have had a tremendous hit in their life. And I hope it gives them hope when they read the story. That's the idea. So that's a central theme. How suffering can still emerge into something that's helpful to other people.
That's good. And sometimes when people suffer, they ask God, are you really there?
Yes. And of course, that goes along with feeling alone. And it seems to me like if I can discern Western society, that's one of the great anxieties. Are we alone? Is there anybody out there that's going to help me understand it all, that cares about me? That's part of the motivation, maybe not the entire motivation, but part of the motivation for people wanting to explore other universes, other at least galaxies, and see if there's other extraterrestrial life out there and make contact with people. They want them to tell them what it's all about. And I think if we made contact with extraterrestrials, they would be just as questioning as we are. What's it about? I don't think they're going to have the answers. So it's a kind of thing where people are just asking, am I alone? Is there an answer? Is there something more? And so that's part of the theme, and people who are suffering feel that more intensely, I think, than those that have not yet come to that. And this guy, of course, gets it all at once, it seems, but that was necessary for the story.
And what have your life experiences taught you about God's providence?
Yeah, I can look back on my past life and be really amazed at how God's hand was on my shoulder, but at the time I didn't sense it. Providence isn't something, I use the metaphor of driving in a car. You don't see providence looking at your front windshield or even looking at your side windshield, the present tense or the future. You see providence when you look in your rearview mirror. You see it in your past. It's detected then. And so, my life has taught me to be patient. You think nothing is happening sometimes. You say, God, I'm in this mess. I'm feeling horrible. Can't you do anything to help me? But often something is happening, and you only realize that later on. So again, I hope it's a book of hope. It's intended to give hope to people that are anxious, that are feeling alone, that have taken a big hit, a tremendous loss in their life. It's about those kind of things.
Okay, now we're going to come down to, what does your book cover look like?
Okay, here it is. So there's the title. Got a guy with a sword, and he's got his facial veil, called the kafia in Arabic. And that plays a big symbolic role in the story. Who wears a kafia and why? That's not everybody. I don't talk about everybody having a kafia on, just a few. And those that wear the facial veil, it's significant when they do.
So what format?
We had to have a guy on the cover. Beg your pardon?
Go ahead. What did you say?
I didn't hear that question. So.
I was about to ask, what formats do your books come in?
Thank you. It's coming in initially in paperback. It will be out shortly thereafter in ebook form. So a guy with a sword, of course, because it's set at a very violent time. Most of the story takes place between 66 and 67. The Jewish revolt against Rome began in 66, and the Romans just massacred thousands of people. They were a killing machine. So it's violent. Many of the scenes of violence I took right out of the Jewish historian Josephus. He describes often in great detail the battle scenes and the scenes of violence, and I just took them out of there. And no need to expand the main narrative. Really, you could set any time, because people have these same kinds of experiences, no matter what age you live in or what culture you're in. But I think it makes it an interesting story to set it in this time period.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And thank you again for being on Blessing Express videocast. And I'm seriously looking forward to reading your book.
Thank you. I hope you like it when you do.
I'm sure I will. You've gotten my interest completely.
It's great to meet you and talk with you. God bless you.
Nice to meet you, and God bless you.